Tonight,
the bill as amended passes.
the Senate comes together to get aid to our allies. What the bill includes and does it have a future in the GOP-led House? Plus,
it's the headline of the Post. Falling inflation and rising growth give the U.S. the world's best recovery.
the latest inflation numbers as the economy leads other top issues on the campaign trail. And the Super Bowl commercial that got many asking new questions about Christianity. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Ceasefire negotiations focused on freeing hostages. Good evening from the nation's capital. I'm Jenna Browder. New progress tonight in talks between Israel and Hamas. As Israel expands its ground force in southern Gaza, representatives today from both sides continued ceasefire discussions in Egypt. And President Biden says the U.S. is working alongside negotiators on a deal that would release hostages and bring a 6-week pause to Israel's attacks in Gaza. Posting on X, I give you my word I'm working day and night to find the means to bring all the hostages home. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke of the pain families are feeling.
The agony that they face, simply not knowing the fate of their loved ones, is beyond our imaginations. And here's the truly heartbreaking part. Unfortunately, this is part of a rising trend. Increasingly, states, but also non-state actors, are wrongfully detaining people, often as political pawns. It's, of course, a brazen violation of individual human rights of the victims, a violation of international law, a violation of state sovereignty, and, first and foremost, a violation of their basic humanity.
Meanwhile, back here in Washington, House lawmakers took aim at Hamas and how the group has taken away the humanity of hostages and victims of the October 7th terror attack. The House voting on a resolution condemning acts of rape and sexual violence as weapons of war. The resolution also calls on all nations to criminalize rape and sexual assault and hold accountable all perpetrators, including state and non-state armed groups. Foreign aid is also front and center on Capitol Hill. The future of a $95 billion foreign aid plan now heads to the House. A bipartisan group of senators overcame a filibuster to get a deal done in the early morning hours.
Today we witnessed one of the most historic and consequential bills to have ever passed the Senate. It's certainly been years, perhaps decades, since the Senate passed a bill that so greatly impacts not just our national security, not just the security of our allies, but the security of Western democracy.
After months of negotiations, the final measure passed 70-29. The measure includes just over $60 billion to help Ukraine as Russia's invasion of the country hits the 2-year mark. It also includes about $14 billion for Israel's war against Hamas and nearly $10 billion for humanitarian aid for civilians in conflict zones like Gaza. Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka is in the halls of Congress tonight. Matt, the big question here is, can this get past the House?
Well, Jenna, the knee-jerk reaction here from House Republican leadership is, in a word, no, it probably can't. Take a look at this statement from House Speaker Mike Johnson he released shortly after the Senate passed that bill. It reads in part, House Republicans were crystal clear from the very beginning of discussions that any so-called national security supplemental legislation must recognize that national security begins at our own border. The House acted 10 months ago to help enact transformative policy change by passing the Secure Our Border Act, and since then, including today, the Senate has failed to meet the moment. Now, a bipartisan bill out of the Senate that included border security money as well as that foreign aid, that collapsed last week. So it might be back to the drawing board, but there is one thing to look out for. If there are enough members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, who feel like there should be a vote on this foreign aid bill from the Senate, they could use what's called a discharge petition if they have enough votes. Essentially, they'd be able to go around the House Speaker and force that bill onto the floor. And it's something that some Democrats, including Democrats in leadership, they said they're not ruling out. Jenna?
Matt, where does the White House stand on this?
Well, right now, they're throwing their full support behind that Senate bill, that foreign aid, especially to our allies like Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel. That's been a top priority of President Biden, and he addressed the Senate passing that bill earlier today. Take a listen.
We can't walk away now. That's what Putin's betting on. He just flatly said that. Supporting this bill is standing up to Putin. Opposing it is playing into Putin's hands. As I've said before, the stakes in this fight extend far beyond Ukraine. If we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine.
But again, it all comes down to whether or not that bill gets to the floor. And again, the House Speaker saying right now, no plans to get that bill to the floor.
Yeah, Matt, while the House now begins this debate on this foreign aid package, they're also splitting their focus with a renewed fight today to impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security. Where do things stand with that, with Republicans pushing it?
Well, just last week, a very narrow defeat in that. They needed less than 3 Republicans to vote against that, and they got 3 Republicans to vote against that. That vote ended in a tie, so no impeachment. But now House Majority Leader Steve Scalise is back to cast a vote. He, according to his office, is in complete remission from his cancer diagnosis, which is great news. But now he can vote, and he might be the deciding vote. So they're ready to go on that. But here's the thing. They could do it as soon as today. If the weather cooperates, there's a storm going on in parts of the country, including the Northeast. So if they have enough members who can get here and they believe they have the votes, they could do impeachment as soon as today. But as always, they got to keep, have to keep an eye on the math, guys.
All right, Matt Galka on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much. Well, to the American economy, if you think prices are still high, you are right. The latest government numbers show inflation is still climbing, although not as fast as the last few years. White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has the latest numbers and the administration's response. Abigail?
Well, Jenna, while efforts by the Federal Reserve have slowed inflation, board members aren't ready to declare victory. Part of that is because the latest Labor Department numbers prove getting inflation back to normal might be more difficult than expected.
We've been very clear here that prices are still too high. We're going to do everything that we can to lower cost.
New data shows the Consumer Price Index rose 3.1% over the last 12 months, a higher jump than anticipated, which likely means no cuts yet in high interest rates, as the Fed hopes to bring inflation down to a 2% target before taking action.
We're making real progress.
Meanwhile, on the campaign trail, President Biden is highlighting his economic policies and hailing signs of economic strength.
Consumer sentiment surged 29% in the last 2 months, the biggest jump in 30 years. Americans have filed for a record 16 million new business applications since I came to office. And every one of those applications is a sign of hope. We're just getting started, folks.
Joel Griffith from the Heritage Foundation, however, warns those rosy numbers are misleading.
How is it that consumers continue to spend more, driving economic growth, even though they're earning less in real terms? Well, that's because consumers on average have added $4,000 per family to their credit card balances, and families have drained close to 80% of their savings.
Griffith claims American families are well aware their financial situations have deteriorated in recent years.
And these inflation numbers don't even fully account for the fact that homeownership has been driven out of reach. Those numbers estimate what it costs to rent. If you're looking to buy a home, the numbers are even worse.
And he blames policies from both the Biden and Trump administrations.
The match was struck for this inflationary boom during the Trump administration. A bipartisan Congress pushed forward massive spending, the biggest spending increases we've seen really since World War II. And President Trump signed that into law and actually approved it. So look, the economy right now, for most families, it is rough.
Griffith believes 2024 candidates should firmly commit to get government spending in order, or warns we will see heightened inflation for years to come. Jenna?
All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much. Well, days after the groundhog called for an early spring, Winter is back. A powerful nor'easter canceling flights and schools and impacting travel up and down the Northeast and in New England. That meant a snow day today for public school kids in Boston. But in New York, they went to remote learning.
Long gone are the days of just a snow day and everybody just has off. We expect for them to be fully engaged.
What do you think about not going to school tomorrow and learning from home?
Bad, because I want to learn at school. I don't really want to go to school tomorrow. It's like a Tuesday, and I'm not really a fan of Tuesdays.
And the winter storm put 46 million people under weather alerts today. New York City could experience its biggest snowstorm in 2 years as heavy snow blankets the coast from Boston to eastern Pennsylvania. A Super Bowl ad shines a light on the gospel. Coming up, reaction to the highly watched He Gets Us campaign. Welcome back. Well, setting a record with a staggering 123.4 million viewers. The Super Bowl was the most watched American television broadcast in a generation. And all of those eyes watching were also exposed to a Christian message. The He Gets Us campaign is behind two ads. One that asks, quote, "Who is my neighbor?" with the words, "the one you don't notice, value, or welcome," splashed back in large text, and the other called Foot Washing, that shows people washing the feet of others.
We can live for 1,000 years.
The ads have attracted some criticism, some accusing the commercials of condoning sin and even heresy. The cost, too, with estimates suggesting a 30-second spot cost $7 million. The He Gets Us ads totaled 75 seconds. Well, Jason Vanderground is the president of the marketing firm Haven and a co-creator of the He Gets Us campaign. Jason, welcome. Great to have you with us. So let's just start with some of that criticism. Allie Beth Stuckey and others have accused you of heresy. Others say the commercials imply that Jesus is okay with sin. What do you say to your critics, Jason?
I think one thing would be good for us to go back and just look at the Gospels. And there, we see Jesus at the Last Supper, and he gets down and goes around the table, and all 12 of his disciples, including Judas, who was going to betray him, and Peter, who was going to deny him. And so we think that there's something in the act of treating each other with dignity and respect, being humble enough to do that, that doesn't mean we necessarily agree on every single position we might have.
Yeah. For those who agree with you on the idea that Jesus loves all of us, but they point out that he also calls us to turn from our sin. Is that something that He Gets Us would ever touch on?
We have these very quick introductions. You were saying, even one of our ads was 15 seconds long. And so what we're trying to do is show certain qualities of Jesus that the American people relate with, and then invite them to our website where they can learn more. And so even the two ads that you mentioned, we go into very significant detail about what Jesus meant, what his message was, what foot washing is all about. And so it's on our website that people will get a lot more information about that.
Yeah. Jason, what kind of fruit have you seen from this campaign? Do you have any stories of conversions or life transformations?
One of them was we were on the street in Vegas, and we had a floral activation set up there. And there was one man who said he had been coming there for years and had just really gone unnoticed. And he looked up at this, really it was a helmet that we had made out of flowers that was 15 feet tall. And he said, finally somebody put the love of God on display on the street in the middle of Vegas for everybody to experience. And that's a lot of the type of reaction that I've been hearing since the Super Bowl.
Yeah. If you could, talk to us about the campaign's goals, Jason, and how you measure those.
The goals are to have people draw nearer to Jesus, for them to just look at what he taught, the example that he laid out in the Gospels for us in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to be intrigued by them, to want to explore and learn more, and to draw closer to him.
For those, we mentioned the money part and how expensive it is to run an ad during the Super Bowl. What do you say to the critics who say that that money could have been spent serving people in a different way.
Yeah, our goal is to put Jesus on display in the biggest moments that we have in culture. And certainly you're just mentioning, the most watched program that we've had in over a generation. We think that Jesus and his example should be part of those moments. And we want to have a cultural change towards his value system. And I think the extreme generosity that would come about from more people following the Jesus way would be significant.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot of eyes. 123 million watched the Super Bowl and your ads. So, Jason, a lot of people are talking about the He Gets Us campaign, and we thank you for coming on this evening. Jason Vanderground, co-creator of He Gets Us, the campaign. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, from studying the Bible to taking on textbooks. Up next, how churches in Florida are picking up the responsibility of teaching Black history. After hundreds of colleges stopped requiring SAT or ACT scores during COVID, standardized tests are poised for a comeback. Dartmouth College announced this week it's reinstating SAT or ACT requirements for prospective students. MIT and Georgetown have also brought back testing requirements. It remains to be seen whether other schools will follow suit. Black History Month has been recognized by every president since Gerald Ford, but the interpretation of that history is now under fire in states like Florida. Schools there have scaled back what they're teaching, and as Hillary Powell reports, that's leading some Black churches to step in for schools.
Female faith leaders tell me they're on the front lines of instruction, stepping in to fill a need, teaching Black history at churches, right alongside Bible study.
I vividly remember what happened to me when I tried to integrate a public school system. I mean, I was spit on, I was called the N-word every day, I was beaten, and those things happened not hundreds of years ago. I'm talking 1965.
75-year-old Dr. LaVon Bracey's memories of being part of integrating the Alachua County, Florida school system are a painful yet indelible part of her past.
It's uncomfortable, but it happened. And we need to actually talk about it.
Now she's once again breaking barriers, teaching African American history inside churches with a growing demand. That's in response to the Florida Board of Education approving new guidelines in 2023 for its kindergarten through 12th grade African American history curriculum. The required changes came about following a 2022 law Governor Ron DeSantis dubbed Stop Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act, or the Stop Woke Act. One part of the curriculum drew widespread attention for stating, quote, instruction includes how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Before going to Washington in 2011, Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson served as an elementary school principal who helped urge the state legislature to pass a 1994 law mandating Black history be taught statewide. A founding member of the Florida African American History Task Force, she calls the new guidelines an alarming departure from educational standards. In a statement to CBN, she says, quote, we cannot afford to whitewash history and deny future generations the knowledge needed to build a more just and equitable society. Adding, I fully support what our churches are doing to preserve that history.
So I took it personal. We also realized that history still sits in our pews in the Black church.
Reverend Rhonda Thomas leads the organization Faith in Florida, which created the History Toolkit for churches that's taken off. Nearly 400 houses of worship, including Protestant, Catholic, and mosques across 29 states, are teaching Black history using the toolkit. Haters have also taken note. Thomas tells CBN News she's received death threats.
It did not detour us, but it did empower us.
Because she sees history being on her side. Even before slavery ended, some churches in the North doubled as schoolhouses for freed Black people. After emancipation, many churches opened their doors to educate former slaves, helping boost Southern Black literacy from 5% in 1870 to about 70% in 1900. Ministers like Orlando pastor Sharon Riley see the present work as preserving that history. She hopes the lessons taught to her young parishioners will get them energized to vote.
We wanted to be sure that our students understood, especially on that high school level, that they understood everything that went into giving us the right to vote. It's also instilling in them a sense of responsibility as citizens in our country.
Reverend Thomas adds that while the past can't be rewritten, it can shape the future by using history to soften hardened hearts.
In fact, in some of our churches, they teach it, the Black history class is larger than the Sunday school class. So it's reaching the unchurched.
While these guidelines aren't being used yet in the classroom, that's expected to begin in the 2024-2025 school year. We've contacted the Florida Department of Education to ask how teachers are being instructed on implementing them and whether they have any leeway to use other material, such as content created by the Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force. We are still awaiting a response. In Washington, Hillary Powell, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Hillary. And still ahead, celebrating friendship on the most romantic day. Finally tonight, loneliness is on the rise in America. In fact, the Surgeon General declared it an epidemic. To fight that, this Valentine's Day, people are looking past romance. Take Galentine's, for example. The idea of women celebrating other women has revolutionized the holiday. The owner of One Painting Party Studio in Chicago says Galentine's events help show the importance of nurturing friendship.
I think it's important for people to get together, to meet each other, or to have fun with friends, because I think connection is the most valuable piece in the human experience.
And mental health experts are stressing the importance of spending time nurturing relationships with friends and family, and say Valentine's Day can serve as an opportunity to do just that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you right back here on Valentine's Day. Have a great evening.